Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending our webinar. The plan today is to discuss the major issues we are addressing at our AGM in 12 days' time and to answer your questions. Thank you for tabling so many. I'm here today in the long room, the most famous room in sport, and I wish you were all here with me. Behind Guy is the Earl of Winchelsea. Behind me is W.G. Grace, and Thomas Lord is looking down on us all from above. Guy, our Chief Executive and Secretary, is with me, as is Alistair Cameron, Assistant Secretary Finance. The Assistant Secretary of States, Robert Ebden, is with me, and our Assistant Secretary, Membership and Operations, Jamie Clifford. Much of the AGM will remind us what a wonderful year 2019 was for our club. But the coronavirus has struck us, and most of the world as well, out of the blue. At this point, I'd like to thank you, the members. These are not easy days for any of us, and your support has been tremendous. No one likes paying a sub when the prospects for cricket are uncertain, and you've been fantastic and done it with good grace. Thank you. Lord's is closed. The environment is full of risk and uncertainty, and we are in the middle of our biggest project ever, the rebuilding of the Compton and Edrich stands. At the AGM, we will effectively take the decision on whether to pause the project this July and conserve our cash, or to implement the committee's life membership proposals. Now, these proposals aren't perfect. This is not a perfect situation, but they strengthen us financially. They reduce risk. They enable us to finish the stands. They place us in an enviable position, and we've structured them to be of interest to members. Staying well financed and keeping our development programme going is fundamental in our relationship with the English Cricket Board and preserving our 2 tests a year model. And we aren't going to risk that. Guy will take us through the life membership issues and questions. But there is one thing that I would like to say. I've heard it said that selling life memberships is unethical, somehow morally wrong. I couldn't disagree more. Now, I understand, and we all share this, I understand members feeling uncomfortable, richer people somehow having an advantage. And none of us, want to sell life memberships to those not on our candidate list. And Guy's going to cover that. But this is the only proposal by which everyone benefits. It's not compulsory, and we all benefit from the better off carrying the load. It reduces risk, it enables the Compton and Edrich to get finished, it strengthens the club financially, and it puts us in an enviable position. This is not unethical. To me, what is morally wrong is burdening our club with debt at a moment of maximum risk and uncertainty in the middle of a national crisis, and committing our successors to potentially years of financial constraint and difficulty. Now, this we will not do. I would like to ask members who were around, as I was in 1997, the last time we sold life memberships to help fund the grandstand. Now, can any of you recall a great moral unease, a deterioration in our culture? No. We were all delighted with our new grandstand. Guy's now going to take over to cover certain administrative matters.
Chairman, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. An overwhelming response to today's webinar with over 2,000 members registering their interest. I'm sorry for those that weren't able to join that today. Inevitably, technology plays its part. It's not through lack of investment or effort. We've got a big team, an external team in place. It's like the BBC studios in here at the moment. But we've got some work to do. And of course, we have to make sure that we've got a stable platform for the AGM itself. But nonetheless, this is a great opportunity for us to cover a lot of ground. This film is going to last around about an hour and 15 minutes long. There's a great deal to cover. We're going to canter, if not gallop, through some of the topics because we've had lots of questions in advance, actually often on very similar themes, and we've tried to ensure that we cover all of the pertinent questions that members have posed. It should go without saying, I guess, that what we say on these webinars and films and members' meetings more generally is confidential, and in order that we might be as open as possible, it's really helpful that we all respect that confidentiality, because it's on that basis that we can communicate, have a discussion, engage in a debate, and move forward. And we hope that members are appreciative of that intention. So during this afternoon, we're going to run through a number of different areas, broadly following the AGM agenda, and provide you with some background on the various proposals that the committee has made. And that's going to include arrangements for a virtual AGM, the financial situation that the club finds itself in, an update on the Compton Edridge redevelopment, the life membership proposal, a lot of interest and questions on that, and of course an update on governance change, which you will cover off during proceedings. It's worthwhile saying that despite the challenges created by COVID, and an inevitable focus to concentrate on the negatives, your club actually remains in a good position and in good shape. We're weathering the financial storm that we currently find ourselves in. Our attention and focus is really starting to gear up to think about the return to playing cricket, the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. The Compton Edridge development is outstanding, and hopefully we will be able to update you on that today. And of course, a subject close to members' hearts, and if I may say so, their posteriors, pavilion benches. The new pavilion benches have arrived. They are a great addition to the ground, and we will be communicating with members tomorrow on the old benches, which hopefully you'll find is a good piece of news. So let's keep moving on, and I'm now going to hand over to Jamie Clifford, the Assistant Secretary of Membership and Operations, who will cover the procedures that will be in place for the virtual AGM.
Thank you very much, Guy. Good afternoon, everyone. As members will be aware, the MCC committee has determined that it's appropriate to make special arrangements for the AGM later this month, and this is as a direct result of the impact of COVID-19. And these special provisions are laid out on page 3 of the AGM document. A quorum of 50 people will just not be possible given the current conditions. And the Royal Charter and the rules of the club have not been drafted with virtual meetings in mind. And so, because it's a requirement of Rule 23 that there is a quorum of 50 members present in person and entitled to vote, amendments have had to be made on the basis of the procedure set out under Rule 29.2, amendment by the MCC committee, specifically to allow the 2020 AGM to take place in a manner which is not repugnant or contrary to the law or inconsistent with the provisions of the Royal Charter, i.e. this year by way of a virtual AGM. And it's important to stress at this moment that it's absolutely not permissible for members to attend the 2020 AGM in person. Just moving on to voting, the MCC committee considers that all items of business on the agenda for the annual general meeting which require a vote are of sufficient importance to the club to justify the use of postal and online voting, so as to enable full and senior members to vote without having to be present at the time of the meeting. If you wish to vote by post, the postal voting form, which is in your AGM pack, must be returned so as to be received no later than 12 noon on Monday the 22nd of June. Online voting is already open and will close at 12 noon on the same day. And then online voting will reopen on the evening of the AGM at 7:30, and will be open until midnight the same day. Results will be announced the following morning by email to members and on the club's website. You've probably read that the committee has asked that the President, Kumar Sangakkara, stand for a further year, and he's prepared to do that. And this is as a direct result of the disruption caused by COVID-19 to his period in office. It's therefore recommended to members, and by supporting this resolution, members would accept that Rule 8.1 will be suspended until the 30th of September 2021. And this is item 6 on the AGM agenda.
Jamie, thank you. I know that members actually had a number of questions on arrangements for the AGM. I think there were 3 matters to address. Can I ask you to cover those off now, please?
Thanks, Guy. Yes, the first question was from Tim Spelling. He asked, why is the AGM not taking place in the nursery pavilion, where it would be possible to accommodate 60 plus people? Well, at present, the legislation in place means that we simply aren't allowed to do that. Nevertheless, it's important that the business of the club continues, and so we are putting in place these alternative arrangements, to say nothing of how we might select, of course, 60 members from our membership to attend. The second question was from Philip Law, and he requested that a chat moderator filter questions and pass comments to the AGM. This came out of a previous webinar that we hosted. It's a good idea, and that is something that we will do for the annual general meeting. And finally, there was a question from Michael Bate, who asked, what happens if agenda items 4A, B and C are not approved by members? These all relate to reappointments, a trustee, the treasurer, and the club's auditors. And the answer to that is straightforward. The committee would have to represent a proposal to a future general meeting.
Jamie, thank you. So hopefully that has answered the majority of questions on arrangements for the AGM. Let's turn our attention to the highly important subject of finance. And I'm going to ask Alistair Cameron, the club's finance director, or more traditionally called the Assistant Secretary of Finance, to update you. So Alistair, over to you.
Thank you, Guy, and good afternoon, everyone. Given that the 2 of the important themes this afternoon are life memberships and the Compton Edrich Stand redevelopment, I wanted to take just a few minutes to set out the financial position of the club for both this year and also for 2021. I will then also touch on funding options, which Guy will return to later. As you'll be aware, COVID-19 is having and continues to have a significant negative impact on the ability of organisations and businesses to continue to operate, and our club is no exception. For MCC, our overriding focus has to be on finding the means to complete the Compton Edrich stands ready for the 2021 season without undermining the financial position of the club. For those of you who attended the previous webinar on the 19th of May, much of what I have to say was said then. However, it may be no bad thing to hear some of these messages again. So, let me start with 2020. In summary, as a result of the disruption from COVID-19, MCC's top-line income will be around 30 million lower than expected. And while significant cost reductions have been made, our cash position will be about £10 million worse than expected at the end of this year. To give you some further detail on this, our remaining income in 2020 will comprise 2 main sources. Firstly, member subscriptions and entrance fees, and secondly, insurance proceeds from international tickets sold in advance. Fortunately, sales of tickets were strong before lockdown started in mid-March, and as part of our staging agreement, the ECB had ticket insurance in place which included cover for the pandemic. On the expenditure side, we will have reduced costs by between 20 and 25 million across labour and overheads, and the club has also received government support in 2 areas. Firstly, we've been given full relief on our business rates for the 12 months from April of this year. And secondly, the club has been making claims under the government's job retention scheme since the 1st of April, and the scheme has now been extended to the end of October. So, as mentioned, this means our cash position will be around 10 million worse at the end of 2020 than we expected. 2020 is probably the worst possible year for a pandemic such as this to happen when the club is in the middle of its largest redevelopment project in its history. Of the 52 million or so we are spending on the Compton Edrich stands, by the end of this July, we'll have completed 2/3 of the project in cost terms, having spent around £35 million. Ignoring the fact that we have contractual commitments not to stop, the cost of pausing and restarting the project could be between £4 million and £5 million. So now is therefore not the time to stop the development unless there is absolutely no alternative. So, to summarise the 2020 position, we expect a 30 million drop in revenue and a 10 million drop in closing cash, which means the club will require additional funding. Turning now to 2021. The outlook for next year actually remains much less certain than for this year. Without a vaccine, the likely need for social distancing, particularly for large gatherings, will be a key factor which will drive the club's financial performance next year. If we cannot host full grounds for test matches and T20s, our ability to generate a surplus is in doubt. Clearly, the situation may improve, but it is important we plan for this downside case so that we are A, prepared for that eventuality, B, can continue to operate this club, and importantly, can complete the Compton Edrich stands. Our key sales window for 2021 is from this October through to March of next year. So if social distancing measures are still in place for large gatherings, then advanced sales of tickets and hospitality are likely to be weak. In this scenario, income for 2021 could well be lower than for 2020, and the club could need 15 to 20 million of funding to get us through to the end of next year. And it is this scenario that we must plan for. I wanted to finish by talking about how we plan to finance this funding gap. The Treasurer has written to members setting out our funding options, as well as reinforcing the case as to why debt is not the right option and why the proposed life membership scheme is the best way forward. I want to make just 2 points. Firstly, we'll have no certainty on how long our operations will be impacted by COVID-19. It therefore makes no sense whatsoever to add to the club's financial risk by taking on debt, which increases rather than reduces the financial pressure on the club. Debt has to be repaid and has an interest cost each year. A £50 million loan now will cost the club at least £20 million over 10 years in interest and repayment costs, money that could be much better spent on more important projects. Secondly, the life membership offer does not have a repayment burden and also has been priced attractively to existing members. It will also, by creating a small number of new members and opening the offer to those on the waiting list, offers the opportunity to generate over 7 times more in funding from each new member than we anticipate from each existing member.
I hope that gives you a good flavour of the financial situation. And inevitably, we had lots of financially related questions. This is going to be a game of 2 halves. So I'm going to take the first set, and then Alistair's going to take the second on finance. He may accuse me of picking all the easy ones myself, but I think that would be a harsh criticism. So the first financial question came from Mr. Tancock, which was, did the committee consider asking members for interest-free loans or offering discounts for advance payments of subs for the next 5 to 10 years, a multi-membership deal in effect? And Mr. Tancock's question is indicative of lots of questions about options and considerations. The straightforward answer to that question is yes. We did look at loans from members, but we didn't feel that it was a robust mechanism to raise the funds in a short time frame to meet the financial objectives that we had. We thought that take-up would be low, and it would not generate sufficient funds. Mr. Eason asked a similarly related question, again about options, which was whether a member's levy, why a member's levy of £1,000 was not recommended. And this subject has come up many, many different times. We hope that the Treasurer's email really laid out the effort and activity that's gone in to thinking about different options, whether that's bonds or levies. And I'd encourage members to read that. But in simplistic terms, it was felt that a member's levy was not something that the membership would be prepared to support. And I think that it has to be taken in the context of a retention of membership subscriptions this year. A very difficult decision to make, a subject we'll return to later on. Also, of course, the necessity to secure the club's financial position, which is absolutely vital. And I don't think it really had the support of M&GP, the Membership and General Purposes Committee, when we discussed it with them. So we did consider it, but we did not decide to take it forward at that particular stage. The third question, which is partly financially related, is around a risk register, and this was tabled by Mr. Rutt. The question was, does the club maintain a risk register? And if so, did this pandemic issue feature in such register? And who's actually responsible for the overall management of risk at the club? The answer is yes, we do have a very detailed risk register. It's maintained by the executive on a weekly and monthly basis. And in addition, there is a risk subgroup of the Finance Committee who oversee the executive's work in that regard, that challenges us and checks on issues of major risk. In addition, when the pandemic coronavirus broke out, a risk management group was established to deal specifically with this issue that comprised the executive, the principal officers, a trustee, and non-executives with experience in both healthcare and financial risk. Did we have pandemic risk at the top of our risk register? No, we didn't. And I think that's something that, of course, in hindsight, we should have addressed, but it was entirely unexpected. However, the issue of the pandemic is also linked to insurance, and this is a subject where members ask some questions, and we'll come back to insurance slightly later on. Mr. Goulden asked when we would go on sale with Compton and Edridge Stand debentures, would priority be given to members? The answer to that question is we're not quite sure as yet about when we will start the debenture sale for Compton Edridge. Much will be dependent on the outcome of the AGM and life memberships in particular. Of course, also dependent on the bill programme for Compton Edridge itself. But we certainly don't want to be selling debentures starting in 2021, only having to pause construction for a season or two, dependent on the outcome of the AGM. So hopefully that answers your question. There were two HR-related questions. The first one was from Mr. Keane, which was really questioning the government's furlough scheme and how many staff have been furloughed and whether we were topping up salaries. The answer to that is yes, we have been making use of the furlough scheme. We've communicated that to members. We have furloughed 140 out of 220 of our permanent staff. We have also furloughed a number of our casual workforce who are so reliant on workload during the summer. Zero-hours contract workers have to be looked after, and we are certainly doing that as a club, which we think is right to do. The subsidiary question was, has the Chief Executive and senior colleagues at MCC volunteered to accept salary reductions as well in view of the MCC finances? The answer to that question is yes. The senior management team took a 20% reduction in May, and we have recently agreed with all staff that there will be a staff-wide salary reduction programme that comes into effect from the 1st of June. And that is agreed on a sliding scale, so those on higher salaries pay more, and those on the lowest salaries pay least. And we think that's a sensible way of playing our part in making sure that we collectively weather the storm that we find ourselves in. So that's my half. Let's turn over to the tricky questions. Alistair, over to you.
Alistair, the first question for you comes from a number of members. This was a question that was asked by a large number of members, including Tim Spelling, Howard Gill, Anthony Palmer, Anthony Wright, Adam Dowling, Robin Knight, William Naylor, and Lucy Horrocks, and it relates to pandemic insurance. And the question is, did the club take out insurance to protect against cancellation of major matches? And many of them reference the All England and the Wimbledon Championships and the Royal and Ancient and the Open. And if so, why not? And will the club consider taking out pandemic insurance in the future?
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Yes, so I mentioned in my piece earlier that the club does have insurance for ticket sales for international matches, and we've been very fortunate to benefit from that, from the advanced ticket sales. And that's something that's been put in place as part of our staging agreement with ECB. In terms of other sort of non-ticket match insurance, we don't tend to take out insurance because actually the premiums tend to be pretty prohibitive. And then, of course, we have the whole gamut of employers' liability and all that level of insurance. But I guess the other question people are asking is, do we have business interruption insurance, and does that cover us for COVID-19? And the answer is we do have business interruption insurance, but these things tend not to cover the COVID-19 as it wasn't known when these insurances were taken out. So I think that's the answer on that.
Adrian Baker asks, the club had £35 million of cash at the end of 2019. How much of that is expected to be used on the development?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to start this year with 35 million in the bank. There's a further, at that point, there was a further sort of 38 million or so to be spent on Compton Edrich, of which about 31 million will be spent in 2020, so this year, and the remainder will be spent mainly in 2021 with a small balance in terms of retention payment in 2022.
And a couple of questions relating to debt. The first one is, given the extremely low cost of borrowing, why such an aversion to bank debt?
Yes, and this question has come up, and I think we may be labouring the point, but for us, the club stance on debt has been set out in the AGM document and also in the Treasurer's email sent on Friday the 5th, so last week. And as I said earlier, a £15 million loan will cost £20 million in interest servicing and repayment over a 10-year period. And that equates, so that would take out approximately £2 million a year out of the club's cash flow, which is about 30% or so of what we would normally expect to generate in cash each year. So that would be, that would hamstring the club quite significantly if we were to take out a debt like that.
And then the other question related to debt is, again, relating to the club's attitude towards debt and the club being against debt. Why did the club last year arrange a facility at Lloyd's of 15 million at a cost of £75,000? Why was it acceptable for the club to take on debt last year and not this year?
And I think that's a very good question. I'm pleased that's been raised because the club remains, as I said, averse to taking debt. But actually, the reason for taking out that bank facility was to make sure we have sufficient headroom to complete the Compton Edrich project. And we're still only halfway through it. So it makes no sense to use that 15 million to cover the current position when we've still got so much further to go with the project. So we intend to continue to keep that £15 million bank facility in reserve to cover us for potentially a worse case commercial outcome than the one that we're modelling for.
And then a final finance question comes from Benjamin Fairclough, linked really to the life membership proposals. What is the fallback position if the £15 million target is not achieved?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that we would have to carefully consider whether we could continue to develop the Compton Edrich stands, or whether to pause it, or we would have to look at alternative financial options.
Alistair, thank you. Well, hopefully that gives you a flavour of the big financial questions that members have asked, and we'll continue to address these issues with members as and when we need to. We covered off the subjects of debt and options, and I think we've tried where we can to describe the club's view in as much detail for members as possible. So having dealt with finance, let's move on to the third big area on the agenda, and that's Compton Edrich and the status of that development. So I'm now going to hand over to Robert Ebden, the Assistant Secretary of Estates, to update you. Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Guy. Good afternoon, everyone. Compton and Edrich is the biggest construction project we have ever undertaken, and the nursery end of the ground is being transformed. Now, I know that many members have expressed a desire to see the progress to date, and so we've put together a video for you to see, and here it is.
It's the biggest build that we've ever done at Lords. We've got a great project team engaged in it, and we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to deliver it successfully. And we know what the cricket spectator wants. They want exceptional levels of service. They want to enjoy the experience of being here, and we're really confident that Compton Edridge is going to deliver that for us.
So as you have just seen, a great deal of work has been going on since the end of the last cricket season, bringing 2 years of design and of careful logistical planning into reality. Now, all construction projects have their challenges, and we have overcome our fair share since last September. Our building contractor, ISG Construction, endured one of the wettest winters in the past decade. We found and had to repair historic damage to a large Victorian Thames water sewer underneath the old Compton stand. That set us back from progress in December and January, and as we started to erect the steel frame in January and February, we had to contend with a sustained number of weeks of high winds, which limited the time in which the cranes could operate. Westminster City Council have been fantastic, and in an unprecedented move, they granted our request to allow the builders to work every weekend for a 4-month period in order to catch up on the programme. And as we emerged from all of that, COVID-19 pandemic lockdown came in March. ISG put a COVID-19 plan into operation rapidly and have been able to continue to work safely with between 100 and 125 operatives on site each day, whilst adhering to social distancing measures at all times. There have been supply chain issues to contend with, and normal productivity levels were initially reduced down to around 60%, but ISG have done a truly incredible job in recovering output to near normal levels now. Work on the floodlights installation resumed on the 27th of May and will be completed by the end of June. The new Compton and Edridge scoreboards installation commenced on the 1st of June and will be completed and fully integrated into the Allen scoreboard by the end of July. Will therefore be ready for cricket to return to Lords if that is the case in August. The plan is for building works to continue through whatever cricket does take place in August, September and October this year, and ISG are on programme to deliver the new stands on time at the start of May 2021. To date, we have spent about £30 million on design fees and construction, and there is another £22 million to go over the next 11 months, a spend of roughly £2 million a month. We have a healthy contingency remaining of around £900,000, and the project is in good shape and is being regularly scrutinised on your behalf by the MCC Estates Committee and a project steering group of MCC members who are construction industry leaders. To stop or to pause would plunge MCC into a myriad of contractual claims, warranty disputes, supply chain complexities, and create issues with protection of the fabric of what had already been installed and built. Pausing the project will also deny MCC the incremental income budgeted for the new stand's extra 2,600 seats, the 400 new debentures, the 12 food and beverage facilities, and our 2 new restaurants. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an amazing project of which I am privileged to lead. In the interests of completing this vital redevelopment, which will be transformational for the club, I would ask you to support the proposals presented. Thank you.
Robert, thank you for that update. Now, there were a number of estates-related questions, again split into 2 rough sections. I think Jamie and Robert, if you could deal with issues relating to Compton Edridge, and the Chairman and I will tackle questions that were posed by members on the leasehold land. Over to you.
Thanks. The first question comes from Stuart Dick. He asked, what is the breakdown of the estimated additional £4 to £5 million of cost in suspending construction?
Well, thank you, Mr. Dick. The quantity surveyor has prepared a detailed breakdown of the £4 to £5 million. Forgive me for not wanting to go into the precise figures. That's the matter, or would be a matter of sensitive negotiation with ISG if we got to the point of having to stop. But broadly, the £4 to £5 million is to cover demobilisation, loss of profit, loss of expense that the contractor would be looking for, legal fees, procurement complexities, and of course the construction inflation over the period of time of whatever the stoppage happened to be.
The next question was Brian Thornton. Assuming the committee receives approval for the fundraising proposals at the AGM, will it be possible for the contractor to commence work on phase 2 of the works before the original start date for phase 2?
Thank you, Brian. Actually, the contract doesn't have any formal phasing dates. There's a start date and a finish date. We were going to be stopping for cricket during this summer, but that doesn't apply now. And as there are no major matches at cricket, we will continue to build throughout the summer. So assuming the funding proposal is approved, we carry on. If it is not approved, we stop.
Does the contract with ISG allow for a phased completion, and what are the cost implications and mitigations, future receipts from completed stand, etc., of such an idea? And that came from Adrian Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. The contract, as I mentioned a moment ago, doesn't have any phasing completion arrangements in it. To introduce such a thing would cost the MCC considerably more in delay costs, loss and expense, and less incremental income next year, so more than would be possible to mitigate against.
And then Ray McLennan asks, how much have we saved financially by having building work going on without delays from April through to August?
The answer to that is we've saved £700,000.
And then David Wolsey asked, what is the current status of the Compton Edrich redevelopment, given that the test match was due to start here at Lord's on the 25th of June, and the stands look nowhere near ready for the seats to be used for that match, albeit that match isn't happening. Is there a delay, cost overrun, and if so, is this for the club or for the builders?
Thank you, Mr. Wolsey. I'm pleased to tell you that there are no time overruns. We are on track because of the 24 days or so that we had told the contractor that they would need to stop for cricket this summer. Those have gone back into the programme. So we are back on track to complete by May 2021. There are no cost overruns either, because the cost of sorting out the sewer and accelerating has been paid for out of our contingency pot, which sat within the £52 million that was approved. And we still have £900,000 in our contingency to complete the project from where we stand now. So no time or cost overruns, I'm pleased to say. Thanks, Robert.
Robert, thank you. So there were three wider estates-related issues that were posed. The first question was from Mr. Eschweg. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. If I haven't, I apologise. Which was, why isn't the third party who purchased the nursery ground land named, and who was it, and did MCC bid for it? Now, some members will know the answer to this question, but others won't, and it's probably important and useful for the chairman to give you a brief answer to that question.
Yes, the people who bought the nursery ground, the tunnels under the nursery ground, this was 1999 with Charles Rifkin and Jonathan Levy. Did MCC bid for it? Yes, they did bid for it, but they lost it on the floor of the auction to Charles and Jonathan.
The second question, again, which was a subsidiary one from the same member, was the property we own, are they freeholds or leaseholds? And if the latter, do we own the leasehold? So it's worth me covering this one off. So we own Lord's as the freeholder. The 32-metre wide strip of land at the eastern end of the nursery ground is owned freehold by Network Rail, with a 990-year head lease to Rifkin and Levy Partnerships. MCC has a 116-year remaining sublease on the top 18 inches of ground. We own the freehold of number 4, number 6, and number 12 Grove End Roads, and the double plot of the car park at 6 Grove End Road. We've let number 12 Grove End Road out to the Cuban ambassador for a short term of 15 years. The lease which was agreed in 2018, and we own the freehold of Cavendish Close, which we purchased from the Eyre Estate in 2013. The final question in this section was from Mr. Sherman, the suggestion to pursue the acquisition of the freehold, whatever the cost, and ask members to contribute. So it was a question about purchase of leasehold land. Chairman, would you like to tackle that one, please?
Yes, we have the lease for another 117 years, so there is a long time to go. I don't particularly like the suggestion of whatever the cost, but it's something that's on the list.
Chairman, thank you. So hopefully that covers off the estates. Let's move on, I guess, to the central subject where we had most questions inevitably as we move towards the AGM, the subject, of course, of life membership. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk this through. I'm going to cover the context, the options that were considered for financing, the proposals themselves, and what protections exist for current members. I should say at the start, of course, there are some members who are completely engaged in the detail of these proposals, but there are others who are not. And this part of the presentation is designed to give you the complete picture to enable you to make a well-informed decision at the AGM. So the context, of course, is coronavirus and its impact on the club. And the financial challenges that the club faces have been well articulated in the Treasurer's recent email to all members, and hopefully by Alistair a few minutes ago. We face a reduction of £30 million of income this season and no prospect of any revenue-generating activities for the immediate future. And in the middle of this crisis, we find ourselves halfway through the construction of Compton Edridge, a £52 million development project, the largest and most complex in the club's history. I think all members would agree that we need to find a way to finish this project and protect the club's immediate financial future, as the costs of pausing and delaying, as outlined, are in the region of £4 to £5 million. Now, over the last 4 months, there has been a lot of work done by respective committees and the executive across the club, engaged in financial modelling, assessing the impact of coronavirus both this year and next. And that analysis is, of course, based on different assumptions, but in brief, it established a base case financial model, which sees no cricket played this season and a complete return to normality in 2021, and a downside case scenario, which sees no revenue-generating cricket either this season or next. And you might not unreasonably ask whether no cricket next year is a ludicrous proposition, but it's probably worth identifying the issues of risk at this particular point. Because the reality, I think, is that a disrupted 2021 season, with the implementation of strict social distancing, could make matters considerably worse from a financial perspective. Self-evidently, we incur all the costs of delivering matches without generating the revenues that we need, and that really increases the level of our overall losses. Now, of course, we all hope that things return to normal, but we must, as a club, be able to cope in a downside case scenario. And as explained in your AGM paperwork, that requires the club to establish an additional sum of £15 million to protect the club during a highly uncertain period. Because this is also a point of major change to the cricketing landscape, the effects of which will no doubt be felt for many years to come. A £380 million loss of ECB income this year will be felt across the game in future years and will impact, I'm sure, both on us and recreational and professional cricket. So, turning to financing options, having established the scale of the problem and the requirement for significant new funds to progress with the build programme, we embarked on an analysis of the various financing options for solving that problem. That included a consideration of debt in some form, a members' bond, bank lending, or the generation of new income through a membership levy, which I spoke about earlier on, or in fact a life membership offer. And the Treasurer has written in more detail on these matters. Our unequivocal view is that taking on debt at a point in time of considerable uncertainty at risk to cricket both globally and domestically, is a dangerous course of action and will damage your club. We would effectively be layering the risk of the coronavirus pandemic with the risks of Compton Edridge, and that is not a course of action that the committee is prepared to take, hence the presentations of these proposals. So turning to the proposals themselves, the Life membership proposition articulated in your AGM paperwork has two component parts. The first is an offer to existing full members to move from paying an annual subscription each year to making one payment for life. And this offer has been divided into age brackets and is reflective of different membership categories. We've set the pricing, we hope, to be attractive to you. The second component part, which is critical in meeting the club's financial targets, is the ability, when necessary, to offer a number of new memberships. The figure presented to you is set at a maximum of 350, but I will return to this subject again shortly. Now, new memberships will be offered in turn to associates, candidates, members' family and members' friends, and all applicants would be required to undergo the club's normal nomination procedures for joining the waiting list. It is worthwhile re-emphasising the point that no one on the existing waiting list will be disadvantaged in their time to membership. It will remain exactly the same. Now, in formulating these proposals, it's important to make the following points, which I hope will provide some balance and recognition from all of us that there are both negatives and positives in the proposed scheme. So let me cover those off for you now, because we've been listening carefully to views expressed by members over the last 3 months. And we should acknowledge that life membership proposition is not without some particular issues. The first of those, of course, is that any rise in new members will increase the pressure on the pavilion and members and friends areas. The second is that the ability of an individual to pay to be elected more quickly than others will be uncomfortable for some members, and that concern will be exacerbated should the offer extend beyond associate members and candidates. And thirdly, concerns have been expressed over how monies will be used, particularly in the context of the retention of membership subscriptions this year. Now, the first point to make is that all of the committee and the executive are sensitive and understand these concerns. But there are, however, ways that we would intend to mitigate some of these impacts. Firstly, we will extend the members and friends areas to compensate for, let's face it, a modest increase in membership numbers. This will ensure that the provision of Rover tickets is not affected. And I think most members would agree that this is manageable, as the completion of the Compton Edridge stands will see the ground capacity increase by 2,600 seats. Secondly, and this is important, we will only offer new memberships beyond the associate member and candidates if they are felt to be necessary to safeguard the club's financial future, understanding the concerns that members have expressed. You will, of course, need to invest your trust in the committee to make sensible decisions in that regard once the sales process is underway and demand can be properly assessed. And thirdly, should there be considerable financial upside to the scheme for the club and we raise much more than is needed to be spent on completing the Compton Edridge project, the committee will then be able to consider how that money is spent. For example, it could be utilised to support the next phase of ground development, a reduction in member subscriptions, support to the MCC Foundation, or a range of other options that would benefit all members. So I hope that brief explanation covers all of the major elements in your paperwork and summarises them and addresses, I think, some of the questions and concerns that have been expressed through webinars and members' communications with many of us. But I would strongly urge you to support the Life membership proposals that are presented to you, because I absolutely believe they are in the best interests of the club. Now, there were lots of questions on Life memberships, and I'm going to keep going and take the 3 that have come up time and time again. And then I'm going to hand over to Jamie, who's going to deal with some of the others. There was several questions about the explanation of a cap, which is referred to in the paperwork, and how this will be applied. And you will note if you've been through your AGM paperwork, that the intention is for the committee to reserve the right to cap the life membership offer should it prove to be overwhelmingly popular. And that's important in order to safeguard the club's long-term financial future. Self-evidently, if everyone chose to take up the life membership offer, it would place the club in a particularly difficult position in future years. But of course, that cap has to be exercised sensibly, and the intention by the committee is to enable as many members as possible to take up the offer if they so wish. And it's not practical to define this in numbers at present, but we will of course consider and discuss the issue with the respective committees in the unlikely event that a decision to set a cap is required. The second question was really around what happens if the resolutions for life membership is rejected. The answer to this is relatively straightforward. We've provided the best option for safeguarding the future of the club, but ultimately it's up for you, the members, to decide. I think there is a general view amongst all of us that we will not fund the continuation of the Compton Edridge project purely through debt, based on the risks we're facing and the impact on the club in future years. On that basis, stopping the Compton Edridge project with all the associated costs and disruption becomes a realistic possibility. The third one, and I won't labour the point because the chairman's already made it, was whether this proposal contradicts the ethos and spirit of MCC, thereby damaging the brand and our standing. And rather like the chairman, I don't believe it does. The scheme to sell new memberships was used in 1996 through largely the same mechanism, and any new applicants would need to go through the same application process as everyone else. Each, according to their means, is an entirely justifiable position as long as there is no impact on existing members on the waiting list, which there isn't. And under this option, those that are prepared to purchase a new membership will be doing the club a great service, because the alternative is, of course, action where everybody suffers. There were many other questions on life membership, and I've been droning on for long enough, so let me hand over to Jamie to cover those off, please.
Thanks, Guy, and I've got Alistair with me as well. Why isn't the associate life member offer tiered in the same way as the offer to full members is the first question, and that comes from Matt Regan, Mark O'Sullivan and Julie Rogers.
Well, to that is, a lot of work went into these proposals, and where we got to is we felt it was appropriate to distinguish between existing members and associate members to reflect the greater commitment that the existing full members have made to the club to this point. And also, it did not feel appropriate to discount associate membership based on age.
Next question is from Trevor Woolley, and he asked, does not offering life membership to existing members raise the same issues as taking on debt? The only difference is that the financial impact manifests itself in future income foregone rather than principal and interest repayable. And if so, why is it recommended when borrowing is so strongly rejected?
Well, that's a question. I mean, the key thing is that the proceeds from life membership is not debt, because there is no repayment due at any point. And in fact, life memberships are perfect for the club in providing cash up front in lieu of subscriptions over a number of years into the future, which is exactly what the club needs at this point to get us through COVID-19 and complete the stands.
And then David Essen asks, the scale of life membership cost does not seem equitable. What is the reason for this bias against older members?
Well, that's interesting, because we've had feedback from some members who think it's very good value for the younger people, very good value for the older people, and everything in between. So I think people will interpret the proposals in their own way. But I think the view that we came to is that the pricing is both appropriate and attractive, and has a balance of simplicity about it. I think it's particularly interesting that in the 1996 offer there were 4 different price points, and in this offer we have 27 price points.
Thanks, Alistair. And the next question comes from Lucy Horwitz and Emma Don. Has the club considered using a quota system to ensure the makeup of the new life membership reflects the wider British population when it comes to gender, race and age? And this is something that, of course, MCC takes very seriously, and I know many will have seen progress that we've made in that direction in recent years. And we have to address our membership profile over time. The thing to say about this particular moment in time is that the Life membership scheme is about raising funds for the club and for a very specific purpose. And so inevitably, the basis upon which members will join the club or continue their association with the club as a Life member will be because they're able to afford to do so. So that really drives everything about the makeup or the likely makeup of the Life members. That said, gender, race, and age profile of the club is something that is important to us. So you can expect to see us return to this theme at future times. It's just that this particular moment, Life membership, is about raising funds for the club. The next question came from Martin Woolmark, and he asks, is there any way to vote for the Life membership resolution in principle to members, but vote against the offering of Life membership to non-members? And the simple answer to that is no. And that's, again, on the basis that this is a fundraising exercise, and the committee believes that moving on both fronts, in terms of Life membership to existing members and then Life membership to associate members and candidates, and thereafter to new candidates, is the way we will meet our financial objective. Michael Chase then asks, how do you propose to stop further overcrowding of the pavilion with an additional 350 members? And of course, with 350 members, there will be an increase on the facilities that the club offers, whether that's physically here at Lord's or in other ways. And the pavilion will see more visitors, but of course, not every member comes on every day. And we know the peaks of attendance, most notably Australia Test matches or particularly high-profile one-day internationals. And in those times, we can increase areas made available for members and friends, and in so doing, take some of the pressure off the pavilion. The next question relates to how else the club might raise funds, and the question is, has it been considered to offer very hefty and immediate Life subscription to a few, quotes, mega-rich individuals? And actually, this question is not silly, because we see in other organisations, most notably those in the arts or charitable sector, benefactor schemes, patrons, and this is something that ought to be on the club's agenda, and it would not be right to dismiss it, except that at this moment in time, that isn't what is being proposed. And then the final question on Life membership comes from Simon Heald, who asks, does my Life membership die with me? And without wishing to put too fine a point on it, the answer is that yes, it does.
Jamie Allister, thank you. So it's the final furlong, so to speak. Let's turn our attention to governance, and I'd like to pass to the chairman, who will update you on the governance proposals.
Yes. Further to the dispatch of the AGM papers last week, the main committee met on Wednesday, and we decided to withdraw agenda item 9, which is the resolution to change aspects of the club's governance. This was because it turned out there were some drafting errors in the appendices to agenda item number 9. They were the sort of errors that we could have corrected and communicated out to the membership and continued, but we thought it was actually better just to withdraw the resolution, make sure we could get it absolutely correct, and then come back at a later date. We do believe that there are a number of important changes that we want to make to the governance to ensure our club is even better run. And we will come back. And of course, there is the added advantage that if things get back a bit closer to normal, there can be a bit more discussion on it.
I think I should acknowledge that we find ourselves in an embarrassing and regrettable position, and I have to say, as your chief executive, the responsibility for that is mine. And I've apologised to the committee and to you for the necessity to withdraw the governance resolution. Of course, there's lots of issues around context, but they're not excuses. We dropped the ball. and I'm afraid we will need to come back to governance at a later date. But I would not see this as an indication of a lack of enthusiasm or desire to see governance proposals put to the membership. I see it more as a temporary delay. The opportunity to create a diverse, skills-based small board or committee seems to me in the current climate to be vital to the future of the club, and it's a subject we will return to later on. There's no necessity at present to continue the issues on governance or the governance debate. So there are a couple of other matters of business and questions that have come in during the course of the last few days, and I suggest that we now cover some of those areas off. Jamie, there was a section on membership subscriptions. Is it worth me running through the first items?
Yes, well, shall I cover off the questions? I'll tell you what the questions are, guys.
Please.
They've come from a number of members. Membership subscriptions for 2020 being an area of particular interest for a number of members, as you might imagine. Mike Filler, Philip Knoll, Mike Evans and Tim Naylor contributed these questions. The first is, what legal right and on what ethical grounds does the committee have to unilaterally decide on behalf of its members not to partially or fully refund this year's membership subscription? The second was, why were we as members not made an offer of alternative options which would have generated a lot of goodwill? The third was, the club said hardship funds would be considered, but no clear application guidelines have been published if a member wishes to apply. So could the committee clarify the criteria of a hardship application? And finally, why was it not made a choice for the individual members as to whether to donate MCC funds in respect of this year's subscription, or alternatively have it, or a percentage of it, transferred to the following season?
Jamie, thank you. These are all entirely valid and reasonable questions. We've tried to answer those in the communications that we've made with the members so far, but I'll try and answer these questions effectively all in one go. It's a regrettable decision, but we didn't feel we had any choice as a club. Those membership subscriptions are vital to safeguarding our immediate financial future, and in that context, it was a decision the committee felt it needed to take. More broadly, we feel that being a member of MCC is more than just being a season ticket holder of a sports club. You own the club, you support the club in both good times and bad. And in many years, of course, in some situations, membership represents fantastic value for money. But we do understand and appreciate that for many, this is a bitter pill to swallow as we navigate some very, very financially challenging times. And you will have seen there's no intention to increase subscriptions for 2021. And I reference subscriptions in my comments about this financial situation post-Compton and Edridge. Now, of course, we wanted to communicate to members as soon as we could on this issue. I think all of us look at the schedule and the likelihood of cricket this year, and we felt that it was sensible to communicate and take that decision early. And, of course, the cash received from subscriptions makes up almost 35% of our total revenue in 2020. So the committee understands the impact on members, and we did, as many of you will know, lay out some provisions for members who were really struggling through the financial, through the impact of coronavirus, to communicate with us, and we are dealing with those in the spirit that members would expect us to do in a fair and considerate manner. So I can't really give you a better explanation than that. That's the rationale of why this decision was taken. Jamie, I think the last area to cover off, I expect, is on a more positive note, potentially around the return to cricket. So, could I ask you to cover those questions off, please?
Yes, thanks, Guy. And don't we all wish cricket were here now? And if it's not here now, as soon as it could be. There were three questions that we'd like to pick up today on the subject of a return to cricket to Lords. The first one comes from John Queenby, who says, once cricket returns, what arrangements are envisaged to control the number of members in the pavilion and seating space? And it's an important question. And our thoughts are already turning towards how we operate the ground on match days in a new environment. And clearly, whatever it is that we do, we will do so in accordance with the prevailing requirements of that time. And just to give you a flavour of that, were we to be able to open the ground today, we would be operating on a capacity around about 18% of the overall capacity of Lords. So we have plans in place and we are going to develop them. The big unknown is just how soon or when cricket might return. The next question came from Brian Mack, and it was about if matches are to be played behind closed doors, could the whole ground be arranged to accommodate members? And if Lords were to be open solely for members who could pre-book, the whole ground could be made available to ensure social distancing. And this is a good suggestion, not least because of the reduced capacity that I've already talked about. And I think this is a possibility when we return to action at Lords. The only thing I would add, of course, is if Middlesex were the team that were playing here, we would expect to extend the same opportunity to Middlesex members. And the final question relates to the meaning of biosecure regulations and why Lords appears to be failing on them, and what are MCC doing to correct these shortcomings, and how long will it take? Well, the simple answer to this is that at the moment, under the terms of the matches that are about to be played between England and the West Indies, Lords is not a biosecure venue. And the reason for that is that the arrangements for the forthcoming test matches require all those involved, players, officials, those running the ground, broadcasters, to be on site for the duration of the match. Now, in the case of a test match, that means multiple days, and therefore you need to have a hotel on the ground to be able to do it. So clearly we're not in a position to run Lords as a biosecure venue under the current regulations and requirements. However, I can assure you that we will take the appropriate steps to ensure that we can operate this ground with people in it as soon as possible, and the term biosecure may change in meaning as there's a relaxation in social distancing measures. As I say, you can be assured that we will run the ground to the requirements that prevail at the time of a return.
Jamie, thank you. So before I hand back to the Chairman to close proceedings, can I just thank you first of all for watching this film, for engaging and registering for the webinar. I hope you found it useful. Inevitably, coronavirus and the situation we find ourselves in gives us a number of technical challenges, and we need to overcome those in the next couple of weeks, and we'll communicate with members as we go through towards the AGM in that regard. But leaving that to one side, I hope you've had an opportunity to keep abreast and understand the variety of issues that are affecting the club's business at the moment. So without further ado, I'll hand back to the Chairman to close proceedings.
Yes, I'd just like to follow that by saying you can't actually see it on the screen, but the long room does look like the inside of a TV studio. We've got a whole team from IBM here. The technology was fantastic yesterday. It was good this morning, no problems, and it didn't work. And clearly we got a load more work to do on that. But let me finish off by encouraging you to come to our AGM and of course to vote. This is a crucial time for our club and for Lords. The ground is closed, there's huge uncertainty out there, and we are in the middle of the biggest project that we've ever done. Yet it's also a time of hope and opportunity. Our life membership proposals will cement our preeminent position in the world of cricket. They will enable the stands to get completed in time for next season. They reduce risk at a time of high risk. They benefit everybody and harm nobody. They strengthen our position rather than weaken. And they enable us to keep control of our affairs and to continue our development programme. They ensure we will remain the finest cricket club in the world, working for the good of the game. It just remains for me to wish you and your families continued good health in the challenging weeks and months ahead, and to thank you for watching the video. Thank you.